My diversification means I lower my risk, so I improve my return to risk ratio.
The US economy is on the verge of collapse, believe it or not. It's going to happen soon. Ray Dalio has issued a severe warning on the future of the economy. It can happen in the coming days, and those who are not aware will be in deep trouble as the economy collapses. Ray Dalio is the founder of the world's biggest hedge fund firm, Bridgewater Associates, which manages $130 billion. Dalio bases his company's operations on a set of accepted principles, emphasizing cause and effect correlations and in-depth research of previous events. During his recent interview, he mentioned three main things that are about to explode.
Respect what you don't know and know how to diversify well. Because diversifying allows you to reduce your risk by up to 80% without reducing your income.
Currently, the US has the largest amounts of debt, the fastest rates of debt growth, and the greatest amounts of central bank printing of money and buying debt since 1930 to 1945. Secondly, the biggest gaps in wealth, income, values, and the greatest amounts of populism since 1930-1945 period. And finally, the greatest international great powers conflict, most importantly between the US and China, since 1930 to 45. These are the major issues faced by the US economy, and as one of it goes out of control, everything else follows. A US debt crisis is just getting started, according to billionaire investor Dalio, and that may already be happening. Following the early June conclusion of the protracted political dispute over the sovereign debt ceiling, Charlie Dalio, chief market strategist at Creative Planning, noted in a recent tweet that the government's borrowing increased by an alarming $1 trillion in only 1 month. The total amount of outstanding government debt is $32.5 trillion. Congress enacted a deal early in June that would raise the US debt ceiling just before the US was about to default on payments. Following months of dispute between Democrats and Republicans, the decision was criticized by a number of people, including Dalio and Berkshire Hathaway's CEO, Warren Buffett. The agreement received a D grade from Bridgewater founder Dalio at the time because, in his opinion, it would simply serve to increase the US government's already massive debt load. Dealing with the issue of adding too much to an already excessive debt load, D grade, according to Dalio, it won't change, Dalio said. In May 2023, Dalio issued a more grave warning, claiming that the US was entering a debt crisis in which there was a growing lack of buyers at a time when the government was selling so much debt.
In my opinion, we are at the beginning of a very classic late big cycle debt crisis.
When the supply-demand gap, when you are producing too much debt and have a shortage of buyers, said Dalio. In addition, he predicted that the US would experience a balance sheet recession and that the economy would suffer from increased interest rates. Another major issue is between China and the USA. Recently, Dalio and Steve Forbes, chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes, had a conversation on Dalio's essay from April that claimed that the United States and China were on the verge of war and are beyond the ability to talk at the Forbes Icon Class Summit in New York on Monday. Ray Dalio expressed concern over the potential for both a financial and armed battle for Taiwan's independence. The United States' relative standing has slipped, while China's relative standing has improved. Although they will be equivalent forces in a fight, and those conflicts are multi-dimensional, I am not predicting that the Chinese will defeat the Americans. There's so much to unravel on how we got here, someone said. Talking is almost counterproductive. In August 1971, President Richard Nixon announced on a Sunday night that the United States would not fulfill its duty to exchange treasury debt owned by foreign countries for gold. This was the start of Dalio's presentation. Dalio, who was working as a clerk at the time, had anticipated pandemonium and a stock market crash for the following Monday, so he was taken aback when equities experienced their best day in decades. The same thing had indeed happened when President Franklin D. Roosevelt suspended the gold standard in 1933 radio announcement he learned thanks to his interest in history. Dalio is currently sounding the alarm about a more severe disruption to the world's power system. He asserts that the US has been the dominating force in the globe since the end of World War II, and that it is a country where the headquarters of the majority of significant post-World War II global organizations, like the United Nations and the International Monetary Fund, are located. However, he is concerned about another seismic shift because the United States is owed to numerous foreign bondholders and it has unsustainable wealth inequality. In various nations, most notably the United States, we have seen a rising proportion of populist extremists, in which about 20 to 25% of the right are extreme and roughly 10 to 15% of the left are in a declining proportion of bipartisan moderates. Even if they still hold a majority, the non-partisan moderates are far less determined to battle and win at any cost and make up a smaller percentage of the public. When there were significant wealth and value differences along with unfavorable economic conditions, history consistently showed that there would be greater populism on both sides and more violence. In these circumstances, sizable portions of the populace favored populist political figures who promised to battle and win rather than make concessions. The current situation in the United States is similar to the internal order cycle, which occurs shortly before a civil war and changes to the domestic order. That's what's taking place right now. Looking ahead, the next 18 months will see an increase in the number of important elections, which will result in more political turmoil and may widen the gap between the left and the right. The fights will be vicious and a true test of rule, following and compromising, both of which are required to make democracies work. 33 Senate seats, the presidency, and control of the House will be fought over by a number of populist candidates. And there will probably be poor economic conditions. The respect for the legal and political systems is eroding as we head towards a win-at-all-costs battle. This dynamic is currently in action, as seen by the fact that Donald Trump and his supporters are at war with the legal system, or, as he and his supporters will put it, the system is at war with him. Regardless of your viewpoint, it is obvious that over the next 18 months, the country enter a state of civil war. The battle between the populist extremes and the bipartisan moderates is the most crucial one. However, the bipartisan moderates are largely remaining silent in this conflict. The Democrats and Republicans can only agree on being anti-China, which most Americans also agree on, which gets me to the second of my major force. If you have a financial crisis at the same time as you have a large wealth gaps and therefore big disagreements, you are likely to have populism, said Dalio, noting that a populist is an individual who does not accept defeat. Ray Dalio also gave some tips to survive the economic collapse. Dalio urges investors to be more defensive in their transactions and choice of investment mix. That ought to be clear enough. Fortunately, Dalio has more to say than just generalizations. The coming recession is something that worries Dalio. He stated that the current economic cycle was in the 7th inning, and that, in light of this, the upside looked limited. Dalio provided an intriguing perspective on how regular investors may create all-weather portfolio that will perform well in both good and bad times. You can immunize yourself from the cycle by holding a balanced portfolio of assets. When you look at most portfolios, they have a very strong bias to do well in good times and in bad times. Better balancing is a solution, according to Dalio. He gave several examples of how this portfolio should be put together. It is fairly easy to understand and uncomplicated. He suggests to keep 30% in stocks, 40% in long-term US bonds, 15% in intermediate US bonds, 7.5% in gold, and 7.5% in other commodities. The recommended portfolio allocation from Dalio is undoubtedly quite protective. It is downright dramatically different from the conventional 60-40 mix of equities and bonds. However, it is a trade-off that portfolio is recommending. Dalio presents a portfolio allocation technique that is all-weather in the sense that it will function consistently in the majority of economic circumstances. But it comes with a price. In particular, it will only function at a subdued level when there is a genuine upward momentum, as there has been over the past 10 years. He also recommended to upskill and live below your means, and always saving up for a rainy day. Ray Dalio has been an intelligent investor and predicted various collapses before. Even during various economic crises, his firm has managed to bring in huge profits. What do you think of Ray Dalio's view on economic collapse? Let us know your views in the comment section below. So to get more updates and videos on the related content, you know what to do. Like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell notification to get the latest video updates. See you soon.